And we are I think we're live. I think, well, it says we're live.
Hey, everybody who's not here yet.
Will you have Joe make sure he can find it and it sounds good?
Yeah.
I'm also looking.
I'm looking on my phone.
Yeah, it says, okay, we're live and we got people joining. Hi, everybody.
Hey, how's it going?
Great. You want to start us off, Tana?
Yeah, so we're doing a digital unpacked for Sexual Assault Awareness Month this year. We had planned to do an in-person event for April 19th, but for reasons you can all guess, we can't do that. So we are going to interview a few of the performers who are planning to be part of the in-person event. We also had them help us produce a few videos where they share their thoughts and their art. And yeah, so we're just going to be interviewing them and talking about their poetry and their music and just what consent means to them. The theme this year, as it was last year, is I ask. And I do believe that consent can kind of span more than just like sexual violence awareness. I think discussion generally about what consent means, but yeah, we'll be focusing on the sexual assault prevention aspect today.
Awesome. And for those of you who don't know Soul Stories, Soul Stories focuses on curating difficult conversations, just as Hannah mentioned, this difficult conversations around consent. We focus on unpacking the human experience, and we do that through dialogue, storytelling, and creative expression. Bunch of different events. We have been going live every Thursday. I feel really excited to collaborate with Hannah on this. Yeah, just doing this annually, second time annually, has just been challenging and like joyful, and I don't know, I've just learned a lot from this. And so follow Soul Stories, follow Unpacked, and do you want to talk about CCASA?
Yeah, I'd hope that maybe someone from CCASA could hop on, but I think we're all understandably missing a lot of connections. CCASA is the Colorado Coalition Against Sexual Assault. They do a lot of policy work across the state. So they are kind of like little engines of change. You know, it's a very small outfit. And they do a lot of good work. They've been behind a lot of really important bills in the last few legislative sessions, and especially with the legislative session being out right now, and I'm sure they're hurting just like everybody else is. So we are asking people if they can to make donations to CCASA as you're watching this. You can do that in a couple of ways. You can go to ccasa.org and you can donate there. You can go to Venmo at Soul Stories, at SOULSTORIES.
Nice.
And make a donation and just put for CCASA in the memo. Or if you go to the Soul Stories page, we've uploaded videos of all of the performers either doing their piece or talking about their piece. And they have little buttons where you can kind of like donate like for them if you want to do that as well. So we would really appreciate it if you guys could spare a few dollars for them.
Awesome. And I see some people already commenting, and I'll be fielding some questions throughout these interviews. So if you have comments, if you have questions, feel free to type them out. If we don't respond, we won't get to all of them, but I'm sure the performers would love to see your love and whatever you have to say. And yeah, I think it's going to be really vulnerable for everybody. So creating a really supportive environment, I think, is super important for this dialogue.
I also, just real quick, while we're waiting for Shaun to start, it's because so at 7:10 in about 4 minutes we have our first performer, panelist, whatever we're calling them right now. I wanted to shout out my partner and the designer behind the Unpacked logo and the mographs and the videos that you're seeing. His name is Joe Horton. He's been pretty indispensable for both Unpacked and a lot of what Soul Stories does. And I just wanted to take a second to say thanks to him.
Yeah, honestly, those videos are fucking beautiful.
Watch your tone, Damon.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I having Joe created the logo. Joe has done so much for Soul Stories, and yeah, I feel super grateful.
Yeah. So like a lot of people have been thanking you and me, Danny, and like I want to make sure that we pause and like thank Joe because he put hours in this week trying to get everything together and helping me stay accountable on some things because I've been having a little bit of a rough couple of weeks. And I wanted to also make sure to spread that gratitude to our performers because they are sharing some incredibly vulnerable personal thoughts and feelings and ideas. And it's really important, I think, to lead in this conversation with gratitude. So I want to start there.
Yeah, totally.
So I wanted to ask you, Danny, before we get started, like you were mentioning kind of, like learning through this whole process. How do you feel about all of the online events and how are you feeling about the whole COVID-19 impact on what you do?
Yeah, it's strange. It's been, in some sense, it's been a really nice pivot because I don't have to stand up from my couch too often. I just type into Facebook and we coordinate through email. And in a lot of respects, I was actually just talking to Chelsea, who works on Soul Stories as well as Hannah. Yeah, shout out to Chelsea. She performed last year.
Did.
Wow.
Yeah, right before we get started, we have
Yeah.
podcasts up from last year's Unpack 2 that are really beautiful as well. I'm basically encouraging you to all go immerse yourself in unpacked narratives, but perhaps space it out over a month or so.
Awesome.
Heaviness there for sure.
Yeah, but yeah, I think I would prefer to be in person to do this because creating the energy that's created from an in-person event is kind of like second to none. You can't really compare it. But what's also cool about this is I feel like we're going to get people that we would have never gotten before to join this event this time around.
Yeah, and hopefully just the Soul Stories movement generally.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah. Are we ready to start?
Yeah, we're gonna bring Shaun on. I am hitting the admit button now.
Hey, Shaun. Oh, I think he's got to hit start audio.
Shaun, are you on mute right now?
Yeah.
There.
Hey.
You guys can hear me?
Yeah.
Hey. Am I?
Said, how are you?
Oh, I'm great. I'm right here in the moment. It's like getting ready for a performance.
Yeah, it's a weird vibe, right? So I wanted to kind of start by just asking you about your general, thoughts on consent, because in our conversations, we've had a few interesting riffs on how consent can kind of spread to more than just like the idea of preventing sexual violence. And you also have some interesting stories about, your mom's experience and just how you've observed females in your life reacting to certain social mechanisms. And yeah, so just I wanted to hear your thoughts on consent generally.
So before I answer that, I just want to thank you. I want to thank Danny. I want to thank Unpack, Soul Stories Denver, Joel, Got to give it up to God, Allah, Creator, the Most High, whoever we look up to spiritually. Lex, Mom, my grandma, Shauna, Ty, Jamila, Oya, DMD, the producer, for making the beat, Neptune for featuring, and Brittany Jane for helping me be a part of this project. So I have to take time to acknowledge that, because I feel like without recognizing people who have gotten us to this point, that's just the start of consent to me.
Cool.
And I feel like consent is it's a very weird process. We don't get taught about consent as much as I feel we can teach about it. It's something that I feel like I've experienced in a lot of physical ways more so than verbal ways. Like, it's a lot of nonverbal communication, and I just wish we had a lot more open dialogue about what consent represents for us as people, because I feel like depending on the context that you grew up in, whoever you were raised by, it can mean a lot of different things. So for me, it's a very diverse question, but it needs to be, I feel like it needs to be a subject in school. And then before it even hits the school, it needs to be a topic in the home. But we tend to avoid it because it's very uncomfortable.
Oh yeah, I would agree with all of that. So just a quick note, you were thinking about a lot of people that helped you put together your song, You're Worth It. So I wanted to ask you just about how that piece relates to consent and like the story behind it.
Right. So there's 3 different verses in there. And on the first verse, I mention a student that I was teaching at one point during a summer camp. It's a Peace Warrior summer camp that one of my buddies, Corbin Toby Davis, he runs out in Aurora. So I was doing a hip hop workshop, and there was a young lady who I was working with, and there was a time period where she ended up running away from home, and I don't really know what happened after she ran away from home, and that was about 3 years ago. So that story always resonated with me, but I was feeling so frustrated by not having an answer that I came up with that first verse a few years ago. And then the second verse, that one came along after I put out this song about Centoya Brown, because with Centoya, I came across that story probably a few years ago, probably about the same time as I had this interaction with the student. But originally I learned about and I didn't know how to respond, because I'm like, that could have been my mom. That very much could have been my mom, who was in a detrimental situation. But thankfully, my grandma had a little bit more support to help her navigate the murkiness. But ultimately, I was inspired by Centoya, and then I was doing some research on Instagram and found Shauna's profile saying that, she needed support. And that led me to another activist named Tigress Johnson. And she connected me with Shauna. We had a few talks while she was in prison, and I got to hear her story while she was in prison. And I'm just like, wow, like what's going on here? So they ended up coming out to Colorado in February, and you had the opportunity to meet them, which I hope was pretty dope. But yeah, like that's the nature of the second verse. I just wanted to highlight some of what Shauna was experiencing. Now with my mom, she had me at 13 years old. So I'm at 14 years old, excuse me. So I feel like there's all sorts of question marks with that, like, how did I even get here, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you, so to follow up on a couple of those threads, I'll start with Shauna. Do you want to tell everybody who she is and how she's kind of similar to Centoya, and yeah, just a little bit more about her story?
Right. So I want to be gracious with that story, because I know that she can tell it better than I can. But in a nutshell, Shauna was involved in a situation where her boyfriend was going through a lot of traumatic things, and he had his trauma basically impacting her, and that led to Shauna being sexually assaulted by this young man. And within that experience, she had to deal with that weird, I don't even know how to articulate it because I haven't been there personally. I don't really understand, and I it's hard for me to grasp that power dynamic. But from what I can pick up, it's like she was kind of being held hostage in a way by this young man. And one of his friends was driving to a location of some sort, and he ended up killing somebody. And because Shauna was in the car, she didn't know that the murder occurred, but she happened to be in the car when it happened. She was given a sentence, and basically because she didn't have the $200,000 bond to get herself out of prison, or the lawyer support to get her out of prison, she had to sit in the pretrial phase, and her pretrial phase was 2 years inside of a cell. And she was in a woman's prison, even though she was only 16 years old. So she spent 2 years in a woman's prison out in Louisiana. And it's just like she didn't have the money, she didn't have the legal support to help her. And I feel like that's very connected with Centoya Brown, because if we think about how some of these young people are coming up and their family lack resources, they might be involved with all sort of extracurricular activities, whether that's drugs or there's not a father present, whatever it may be. It's like there's not a lot of support. So because she didn't have the legal support, she didn't have the financial support, she was participating unwillingly in the school to prison pipeline.
Yeah, so you're kind of touching on how like your idea of consent is literally like this systemic issue.
It is.
So I wonder if you could kind of tell me about like what do you like, because you're talking about like these system-wide things, like where do we, like on your mind, like where do we start? Because you mentioned like in the home and in the classroom and stuff like that, and you work with kids, you're a teaching artist, so I'm kind of curious like what your thoughts are in pushing the pendulum back where it needs to go.
I think if I were to look at my mom's story in particular, we have to figure out a way to have open dialogue about sexuality, about personal choice. I feel like, my just a little bit of my grandma's story. She had my mom by herself in the bathroom at 19 years old. So, and she's a white woman. So it's just like a white woman is giving birth to basically biracial child by herself. So it's just like, for one, where's the man? Where is he at? And then why is he not there? And from there, it's like, all right, my mom has to grow up with this very minute idea of who she is and what her body is worth and what her potential is. So from that point, she's in a place where my father basically is another hurting young man, another hurting young body, and he needs attention and love just like she does. So it's like, with them needing a conversation, they just went, from my perspective, into what they thought they wanted, which is that physical attention. And I feel like if there was just somebody in the home, or if there was more structure in the community, then there would have been a lot more support to help them navigate that decision. But without anybody to encourage them to learn about who they want to be first, it led to some really tough lessons.
Totally. So focusing on well, what about those of us like me who don't have kids but maybe could be better about perpetuating that kind of message?
I feel like for individuals who don't have kids, we are that community. You know, it's like when I bring Oya to an event, you know, I'm looking for, and Oya Irie is my daughter, but it's like I'm looking at a Hannah and I'm saying, hey, Hannah, can you watch Oya? Or Hannah, can you watch Love Love? Love Love is my dog. But it's just like in any ways that we can come together in a community environment and not be afraid to assist in raising that child, then it's like we get back to that old mentality of it takes a village.
Yeah, right. I was about to say, so just be part of the village as much as possible.
Exactly. And even when we're intimidated by joining a village or wanting to participate in a village, we have to be willing to sacrifice that uncomfort with an opportunity to love, because right now there's so many people who I feel want love and are unsure of how to ask for it. And that's once again that consent piece. Like, how do I lovingly ask how to love you, right? Or how do I lovingly ask myself how to love without worrying about, well, is this going to get me hurt? Because so many times when I wanted to love, I was putting myself at risk because the other person didn't know how to love, or they didn't know how to love me.
Definitely. So we got a couple more minutes. I think you mentioned that you had a short poem that you had. Do you want to share that, or do you want to talk about something else?
You know, we can keep talking.
Okay. Yeah. I love the like the idea of like consent, even in like asking for something yourself, right? Do you have any of your own examples on how that kind of dialogue has helped you love somebody better?
So at one point, I was thinking like, which story? There's two stories that I have in my mind, but I'll stick with the one where a woman who I had been intimate with, she actually asked me if she could kiss me before we had done anything. And that was very new to me, because when I was in the process of losing my virginity, that was not a ask on my part. It wasn't an ask on the other person's part. It's just like looking at each other and thinking we're on the same page. But with this particular experience, it was like, hey, can I give you a kiss? And it was kind of like a warm sort of feeling in my heart, like, are you asking me to like be intimate with you? And that felt really good. And I've never forgotten that. And I've used that as an approach when I'm being intimate with my partners, or I've done it in the past after that experience.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. You know, it's kind of interesting. Last year, I did my story at Unpacked on my current partner, Joe, asking me the same question, and how that kind of like was a novel experience for me as well. But that was at the age of like 27. I think that's all we got for now, Shaun, because we're up on the end. You're set. I just wanted to thank you, tell Oya, Irie, and Jamila I said hello. Danny, do you have anything that you want to add?
I just want to say thank you, Shaun. That was so heartfelt and so articulate. I really appreciate you doing this initiative and being on the chat with us.
Of course, it's my pleasure. And I just appreciate you guys taking time to organize this space, and most importantly, organizing the context of this conversation, because it's needed.
Thank you. All right, take care, Shaun.
Thank you, guys. Shaun. Peace.
All right, and now we are bringing on John Staughton.
All right. Hey, John.
Hey, John.
Do we have another one that needs to join audio?
I think we're there.
Oh, can you hear us now?
Hey, you talking to me?
Yeah.
Hey, John.
Hi, how you guys doing?
Good, good. How are you?
I'm doing all right.
Hey. All right, so I guess we're just gonna dive right in here.
Guess so.
So, John, you you didn't share your full piece in your video, and again, just for people that are joining, we do have all these videos on Instagram and on the. Can you hear us now? If you want to see the performers talk a little bit more about the piece. but you did a piece about your own violation, and we don't have to get into the details of that, but I just kind of wanted to ask you about, like, from that position, what consent means to you and why you're joining this conversation.
I think in terms of why I'm joining the conversation, it's that for the last 11 years, I wasn't really a part of the conversation. I was a recipient of so many stories and someone that heard a lot from a lot of women in my life about consent and about experience that they had had. And I never felt comfortable joining the conversation as a survivor. There was a lot of shame and embarrassment and confusion tied up in my experiences that I justified away to myself and I explained away in various ways, but it never felt like I had space. And I also never really asked for space in that community or in that group of survivors because I didn't fully understand the ramifications that it was having for me. But now in the last couple of years, in the last 2 years, yeah, I've spoken about this with 5 or 6 people, and seeing this event last year and seeing people that I cared about and that I had heard stories one-on-one from, the idea of being able to finally share my own story, it became more possible. It became something that I really wanted to work on and something that I wanted to think about. And this seemed like a great avenue to do so. And also I knew that it would be facilitated by a community leading with you two, who I respect and like very much, and that I felt would take care of me throughout whatever journey was about to happen. And you have, so thank you.
Of course. We had a joke, but I forgot it, so I'll move on. I wanted to ask you, John, what it felt like finally opening up about your experience.
Well, I was telling someone yesterday that every other time I think I've told someone about this, I've cried. So I was a little nervous about doing this event. It's only happened 5 or 6 times. So the fact that this is now being watched by a couple dozen people is a lot. It's definitely the most people ever hearing about it in one go. And so that was my first reaction, was fear, because it does feel like it's such an untold story, or like a unique story as a white, well-built male man from, that doesn't seem overall like a vulnerable population. I don't know. It was really scary to suddenly flip the script in my own mind and also decide to share that with other people. And I don't know. I'm still a little bit nervous about it, frankly.
Yeah, understandable. Hopefully it's gotten easier as time has gone on.
It has. I think every time I've spoken with someone about it, I've gotten such incredible support, whether that's from my male friends, my female friends, different parts of the world. Everyone has had the same response, and that it doesn't make me feel like I wish I had done it earlier, but it makes me feel like if I had, I would have been held by people. But yeah, it just takes time. It took over a decade before I really was even ready to face it myself, let alone start sharing it with others.
Yeah, I definitely feel that from our previous conversations. And what I was going to tell you earlier was that we like you very much too. That was what I was going to say. But just kind of building on the idea of it being difficult to talk about, before all of the coronavirus pandemic closures and forcing us to do this online, you were talking about struggling to write the story itself that you were going to recite. So
yeah.
Can you just tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm pretty good at riffing with a person that I really feel close with, and I can get very vulnerable very quickly, and I can be comfortable with that person. But sitting down in front of an empty page and trying to write your own story is like getting comfortable with yourself and not having a very human mirror to bounce that off. It's just an empty screen, and having to go back in my memory 13 years, and also this series of events that have happened since then that also tie into the rest of the story. That's why it was hard. I didn't have the immediate empathy or compassion of a friend that I loved listening to this story and holding me, or telling me that they loved me. It was just me having to face this down myself. and that's, you know, processing comes in different forms, and writing has often been helpful for me for different things that I've struggled with. This was a particular challenge because it wasn't a story that I ever wanted to think of as like entertaining or something that I would, you know, share in a sense of like people showing up and watching and paying attention. It was my story. So the idea of turning it into a performance piece, giving it the gravity that it deserves, but also like doing justice to my own truth, that was a hard balance to strike. Storytellers want the stories to be engaging and they want them to be memorable, but some parts of my story I don't want to be memorable. I want them to be just raw and like as honest as I can make it, without the typical flourishes that I often put into my writing. You know, I have to pare it down to just the naked truth of what I want to say, not some poetic version of it, I guess.
Yeah. Would I be out of line if I asked you to give me a condensed version of what you do want to say?
No, you would not be out of line, Hannah. The condensed version of what I do want to say is that we can never really understand what other people have gone through in life, but I think that's particularly delicate and difficult when it comes to consent and sexual violation and sexual history and the concept that we all develop around our sexuality. It's so incredibly unique to every individual, and yet we can often paint groups of people with a large brush as to like what they've experienced and how they feel about sex or what role they take. And I think the message throughout my story was that things can happen earlier in life, or things can happen at any point in life that change you going forward. You don't always understand how it changes you, and it might take you 11 years or so to figure it out. But we can't make assumptions about other people's comfort levels. We can't make assumptions about other people's relationship with sex, because it's a very personal relationship. And it took me a very long time to be able to understand that since everyone is so different in it, that I can never make any assumptions about my partners, because I've had so many partners make assumptions about me. And that even when you look at me and you see what you see in the facade that sometimes I put out in the world, like there's a lot more to it. And every single individual has that depth and often has that uncertainty and that confusion. And not being able to wrangle that in the bedroom can be really complicated and can be psychologically just a head fuck, frankly. And we have to give each other a lot more love and space and listening to what people are saying and what people's bodies are saying and what. I think the consent in general, just we need to up the game, because across the board, because we need to understand that everyone is a complex puzzle that like we don't get to understand in the first go.
No, you're actually hitting on something that I've been hoping to like help like foster that kind of understanding, right? It's like disproportionately sexual violence affects women, but that does not mean that men cannot be affected. You know what I mean? And it can be alienating to survivors that don't match the profile to only talk about the profile, which is a woman, right? And I think that it's really important to like, and you can even like talk about how toxic masculinity is bad for men just like it is for women. Like it's sexism, sexual violence, it's bad for everybody, you know, it's bad for everybody. And I really appreciate you uniquely, John, because of that perspective that you're bringing.
I think it's also very important to remember that sexual violence and sexual assault can have different long-term connotations. It's not like in my case, I don't have a whole lot of fear of an aggressor, and a lot of perhaps women that experience sexual violence have that as like their primary emotional reaction is like fear or discomfort. For me, it's the violation. It's the psychological damage that did, and the lack of trust that I'm able to establish with people, and the difficulty that I have in forming relationships sometimes. So it's not that I walk around the world. It's not that any survivor walks around the world in the same way. And in my case, the long-term damage was far more emotional and psychological than the memory of any sort of physical fear or terror. And I feel like that's an important side that we need to think about for everyone as well, because the damage that it does to your mind and your ability to function emotionally is sometimes irrevocable, but sometimes not irrevocable, because here I am sitting here talking to you. So progress can be made.
Absolutely. Maybe another question would be, because you mentioned earlier, you know, having these kind of conversations with friends didn't necessarily make you wish that you said something earlier, but maybe that you could have. Do you have any examples of what that might look like for people that are hoping to be better, like soft landing spots for people that they love who might be suffering, like to provide safe spaces that you're.
I think it has to come back to something that I put above all else, which is communication and listening and genuinely closing your mouth and opening your heart and not interrupting and just like keeping your mouth shut. And that sounds crazy and it sounds a little rude, but like there are moments when you can tell that someone's going into a place that they just want to be able to express without any sort of reaction necessarily. And other people want you to engage and want you to ask questions and want you to support them in that way. I think it's key that we understand how people want to be heard and how we then in turn communicate with them. I think two people with incredibly good intentions but different listening skills that they can't find the right wavelength, sometimes it doesn't work, even though their hearts are in the right place. And if you want to be a soft space for someone that has something to share, I think you have to begin by relinquishing your control over the situation and allowing that person to find exactly what voice and exactly what level of emotion they want to hit as they share it. If you try to set the tone or if you try to imposition your experience too early, it can make them shy away, which is what happened to me a number of times. It felt like I was getting close to sharing, and then someone would try to recontextualize the conversation or kind of put in their own 2 cents very early on, and it made me quiet down. And I think if we're going to really allow people to speak and truly hold space for them, it begins just by listening in silence and letting them have the floor.
I would endorse that recommendation. I think we got like a minute left for you, John.
Wish I had a limerick to read, but I don't.
No, you're totally fine. Danny, do you have anything that you want to add, or John, do you want to like wrap up on anything?
Danny, you can start.
I was just gonna say, John, as you're talking about holding space, I think as a friend of yours, you're somebody who is incredibly good at holding space and practicing what you just preached. And I really appreciate you just being able to take up space in this conversation. I think as a white male, like entering this space and giving my story last year, and having to rethink some boundaries I may have crossed. I just love that you're kind of like flipping this conversation and bringing some nuance and showing that like men can be victims as well of this stuff. I don't think the conversation has happened, at least in my circle. So thanks for coming on and being vulnerable.
Thanks, Danny. And thank you both for being good enough friends to me that made me feel comfortable to do this incredibly revealing thing that 2 years ago, I never told anyone about this. And through knowing you and being involved in the communities that you both facilitate and operate in, it's brought me a very long way in terms of my emotional health and my willingness to open up and share. So I appreciate you two immensely and all the work that you do in this community. So thanks.
Much love, dude.
Last things about John is I know he's about to sign off, but
whatever, I'm still here.
No. No, I was just gonna say that like I do think that people are aware that men can be victims, but I do think it's important to put a face on it, but like without like forcing it. So I want to thank you. Normally for white dudes, I say take up less space, but thank you more space. Thank you for thank you for just being willing to be that person that's like, yeah, it's happened to me.
Thanks, Hannah. I'll talk to you all soon.
Bye, John.
Bye.
Before we get to Heatherlyn, I just want to recognize that in the Facebook chat, like people are sharing like what's going on for them and supporting and being honest and real, and I appreciate that. Feel free to ask questions, provide support, keep with the honesty. Like this is about the conversation, or this is about creating this conversation. We appreciate you engaging in it.
Yeah. And we can always take a few minutes at the end to more substantively look at the comments if you like.
Cool. I'll bring any questions into the space.
Okay, sounds good. So I got Heatherlyn next.
And here we go.
Hey, Heatherlyn, can you hear us? There you go. There she is. Hey, Heatherlyn.
What's up, y'all?
Hi, Heatherlyn.
Hey.
How are you?
I'm doing all right. How about you? How's quarantine life?
Oh, it's exactly how it sounds.
Yeah, right? It's weird. It's so weird.
I love that color on you. That looks so cool.
Oh, thank you.
So Heatherlyn, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit and talk about the songs that you were going to perform at the in-person event?
Sure. Yeah. Hey, everyone. Thanks for being here and tuning in. And thank you all for curating this conversation, because I think it's something that needs to happen more often, but it's not really, it's awkward to be like, hey, y'all, let's talk about consent. Right. So I really appreciate you all creating a forum and curating this so beautifully. Yeah. So I'm Heatherlyn, and I go by Heatherlyn. It's not just Heather, it's Heatherlyn. People ask questions, so I just like to get in front of that. I'm a singer-songwriter, and on some level, I'm an advocate and an activist as well, but really need collaborators like you all to do that well, I think. I have written a couple of songs directly related to the topic of consent. And one of them is mostly about my mom, and one of them is mostly for my life partner. I don't ever remember a time that I wasn't aware that sexual assault was a danger in the world. I don't remember until recently talking about the idea of consent itself and using that word in particular. But my mom is a rape survivor, and even before she told me about that particular trauma in her life, because of course that's an age-appropriate topic, I remember her saying things that scared me, saying things that, like, for example, at like 10 or 12 years old, like, don't wear your hair down, honey, because men will get the wrong idea. So this idea that as a girl, and a cute little girl, like I needed to be really careful about how I presented myself, and I needed to be really cautious around men, especially ones that were bigger than me, I don't ever remember not, being really like nervous, anxious, looking over my shoulder if alone in the, at night in a public space or in a parking lot or something like that, or being hesitant to get on an elevator alone. So that fear was instilled into me at a very young age. I don't ever remember not having it, really. And I am grateful, though, that my mom was really honest with me at different stages, and shared with me about her a couple of experiences as a survivor. And so the song that I wrote about her is called Even in the Bad, and it's a little bit of a combination of that particular aspect of her story, but also the ways that fear and shame was compounded on top of her own experience by a lot of the pervasive narratives, and particularly the conservative religious environment that we were in, where it was basically like, in that particular conservative religious environment, you're not supposed to have sex until you get married. And So it was like any sexual experience, whether you consented or not, was shame on you. And so it's just, I felt like my mom was living a version of the Scarlet Letter, where so many things were not even her fault. And even if she did choose, make a choice to be sexually involved with someone, it somehow in that patriarchal narrative, that white heteronormative patriarchal narrative, she didn't get to have that agency and that personal sovereignty and autonomy, you know? And I feel like that narrative is kind of in our, like, our human psyche and DNA, because for millennia, women were used as, you know, even in the institution of marriage, like the idea of love marriages is actually pretty recent in human history, right? So women for millennia were considered property and bartering pieces in alliances for wealth, power, and privilege and property, right? So this is deeply ingrained, I feel, and it's so vital that we talk about it. So I didn't really speak much to the song itself, but I'm sorry, I didn't hear where you said it. There was a little bit of a delay there.
Oh, no, nothing. I said, I'm pretty sure you answered all the questions that we would have asked, so it's good.
Oh, okay, great, fantastic. What's next?
No, I just, I don't know if you want to perform a song or do you want to talk a little bit more? Because
sure.
I know.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd be happy to share a song with you. I could share the one that I wrote for my life partner. I feel like it's a little bit serendipitous. I don't think you planned for me to go after John, but I think that is that just works really beautifully, actually, because my life partner, who is male, is also a survivor of sexual abuse, and we've been together. We've known each other for 17 years. We communicate really well. And for the first decade, or actually about 12 years into our partnership, there was something that would come up. There would be this kind of wall that we would hit up against, and even be out for a walk talking about life. And, you know, we talk at length and we talk at depth, and he would just come up against something and he would be angry. And I knew that wasn't about me. Like, that wasn't like, he wasn't angry at me. There was something there that he couldn't talk about. And one of the reasons that I feel Sexual Assault Awareness Month and these sorts of conversations are so vital is because I have been such a personal, close witness to the fear and the shame that keeps survivors from talking about this. And I know that is critical for healing, and to know they're not alone, and to know that we care, and to know that there is justice and there is movement forward in life, you know? Yeah, so one day he had a breakdown and finally shared with me 12 years into our partnership. And it was a powerful breakdown that was a breakthrough. And so I wrote the verses to this song after that experience with him that really was vicarious trauma for me. And I have a cable that's got caught up here. So Jason is actually here. So we need to thank Jason too, because he helps me with the audio for my sound and all that.
Yeah, and I wanted to acknowledge, just because we're talking about consent, and it is someone else's narrative, that you
yeah,
been open to you sharing.
Yeah, absolutely. He gave me all the permission in the world to share. I don't think that he would want to share himself in this sort of space, but he has definitely given his consent to share. So I'm grateful to him for that as well.
Awesome.
Yeah. I will say this chorus I wrote a year in advance of the verses, just because the chorus was some words that I needed to hear myself as a struggling artist. and I didn't know where to go with it. And then after we had this experience together and opened up that conversation, the verses just flowed. So I feel like, I hope that it might be a comfort to any survivor. You're not alone. You're not forgotten. You are protected and provided for. I know sometimes you're screaming inside. I know sometimes it feels like such a fight, but you're not alone. You're not alone. Let me hold you now as you sob it out. Let me hear you reason till your tongue is as dry as your eyes. Let me close my arms around you and your heart's open wounds. Nothing stays the same. It's gotta pass sometime soon. But in the meantime, I will sing to you that you're not alone. You're not forgotten. You are protected and provided for. I know sometimes you're screaming inside. I know sometimes it feels like such a fight, but you're not alone. You're not alone. As you're lying here on the floor, let me tell you there's nothing to be ashamed of anymore. Sometimes you've gotta break down to finally break through. You took the trust fall, and now I'm catching you. And I will always catch you. 'Cause you're not alone. You're not forgotten. You are protected and provided for. I know sometimes you're screaming inside. I know sometimes it feels like such a fight, but you're not alone. You're not alone.
So beautiful, Heatherlyn, for sharing.
Thank you for letting me share. That was like particularly emotional. You can hear a little shake.
But I don't listening. And if Jason's listening, just let him know that I appreciate partners who like to toil behind the scenes instead of taking the spotlight, because I've got one of those myself. So
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
I have an audience question if I can jump in.
yeah,
Sure.
Kylie asked, how do we unpack vulnerability in a responsible way as performers and storytellers?
Heatherlyn, you got any thoughts on that one?
How do we unpack vulnerability as performers and storytellers?
in a responsible way. I also have a little more that she just posted as well. She said, when I first started writing stories and sharing poems, I often felt like it was just dumping and triggering others and reliving my trauma for an open mic or a slam score. My earlier writings were not responsible, as I was just venting and cussing people out in my poems, possibly causing others to relive their vulnerable experiences with no resolve or suggestions on what to do with the information afterwards. So I guess she's just wondering, how do we do this responsibly?
You know, one example that I can offer that I think is an example of responsible vulnerability. I made a post today on Instagram and Facebook about this month and what we're observing. And so right at the top of it, I put trigger notice. I was like, this is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, trigger notice, right? And I think that in artistry and in expression, for one thing, I hope that as people who need to practice vulnerability, we have spaces where we're allowed to authentically, honestly, unreservedly express our pain, right? We need spaces for that. And then, of course, there are spaces where that won't be held and we won't even get what we need in response to that. So, of course, there needs to be discernment around that, right? And this is part of why I feel like this forum is really healthy and important. Everybody knew we all knew what we were getting into, right? When we joined this live stream tonight. And so I feel like that is a good thing, and also a practice of mindfulness to live that question, right? So thank you for it. I feel like there was something else I was going to say to that. I think as artists and performers, there's a time to be provocative, right? There is a time that you want to elicit a response. And then there's a time where you might be in a space where it's like, there's a scriptural reference like casting pearls before swine. So like your authentic, honest, wholehearted delivery is not going to do anything good, you know? So without having thought about this too much specifically in advance, that's what I've got for you.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that, I would say that, because this is something that's come up in our discussions with other people asking about events too. And I think that, yeah, there is a time and a place. And I think that I had a better way of saying it, but yeah, it's essentially just knowing your audience and homage to as much as possible. Because the thing is like that anger that you're talking about is sometimes vital to the narrative.
Absolutely.
But as in John's case, like there's obviously people that have their own experiences and you can't see into everybody's mind. So I think trigger warnings. And then what I really wanted to say is just doing your best and then go, because you might get information as you go that, you know, you did something unintentionally to hurt someone else while processing your own pain. All you can really do at that point is take that information in good faith and do your best to do something good with it. And that's, yeah. Heatherlyn, thank you so much for taking a few minutes and for playing a song. It was beautiful, and always, you're just such a little moonbeam.
Yes. Mama Luna shining through.
Thank you so much, Heatherlyn.
You're welcome.
Your voice is so powerful. It's just like, I'm so happy you could share it with this audience.
Thank you so much. Thank you. In spite of the shakiness, I appreciate that.
Don't take anything away.
Okay.
Have a good night, Heatherlyn.
Yeah, thank you again. Take care of you all. Much love.
Yeah, you too.
So that reminds me that I should be reminding everybody that if you are hearing something that, you know, makes you feel something negative, if it's like anger or hurt, re-traumatizing, please, and you need someone to talk to, or you feel like you need resources and you don't know where to go, please reach out to us. Like, we will not be upset if you're upset with us, you know what I mean? Like, we just want to help. And then the other thing is that, again, CCASA is doing like on the ground policy work that actually makes change. And we're asking people to donate if they can and are willing to CCASA. You can go to ccasa.org, CCASA.org. That's the Colorado Coalition Against Sexual Assault. And then, or you can go to Venmo, you can use Venmo and Venmo at Soul Stories and just put for CCASA in the memo. Or you can go to the Soul Stories Facebook page. There are videos of each of the performers and panelists that you're seeing tonight. And there's a donate button. So yeah, we would really appreciate any love you could give them.
And just to add to it, go watch their videos. They put a lot of time into it and it's really beautiful. And also to go off of Hannah's feedback, like we're hosting this conversation for the second time. We want to grow. We want to do this the best we can. If you have general feedback for us, let us know. And if you hear the howling in the background, maybe you're howling right now.
Yeah, really. We're a little bit behind, so we should probably go ahead and bring Ellie on.
Yeah, here we go.
Ellie!
Hi, Ellie.
You have to join out.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Okay, doing pretty good.
Good.
Yeah.
I like that blanket, Hannah.
Oh, thank you. You know, my this is funny to me because my aunt and my cousin made me this for my first wedding, but I'm no, but I did keep the blanket.
Excellent.
With everybody's consent, just to make that clear.
Yes, of course.
So I wanted to, I guess we should just go ahead and dive right in. I wanted to, I know we gave you some guiding questions, but mine's a little bit more unique to you because you pulled in some euphoria into your narrative. You know, you pulled in some, the words you used were radical yeses and stuff like that compared to like the pain of actual violations. And I'm just wondering if you could kind of talk about what it was like to pull from those experiences and how you think the piece turned out.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important anytime that we have a conversation around consent that we also allow ourselves some space for celebration and for just because so often whenever, I mean, and I had an email exchange with you about this too, you know, when someone talks about sexual consent, I think we are kind of programmed now to go automatically to our trauma, to our pain, to the no's that we carry in our body. And sometimes that can be really harmful and it leaves out a big part of the conversation. And so I wanted to include those radical yeses and that joy that I felt in my body from allowing in vulnerability to, you know, kind of make the conversation a little bit more complete in my eyes, as well as to offer myself some medicine. Because diving in and doing a performance that is only about my trauma experience isn't the best way for me to take care of myself also. So that it was kind of motivated by both of those things.
Definitely. I wonder if you could speak a little bit more about the place of talking about positive consent experiences, like not just in art, but in dialogue.
Yeah, absolutely. In dialogue, in terms of just like navigating conversations with people, or?
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, if we think about, I don't know, I tend to think in images, maybe that's the poet in me, but if we think about consent like a door or a hinge, right? At some point we also have to open it, like we have the right to close it, and we also have the right to open it. And so in conversation, when we allow ourselves to go through that threshold, as well as for someone to meet us there, I think there's a great opportunity for healing. There's a great opportunity for discovery that can happen. So consent in terms of dialogue is, you know, also leaning into that yes that can be kind of scary. In that introduction to my performance, I talked about, you know, choosing vulnerability in the face of fear. And I think that that happens a lot in dialogue, especially for getting down into, you know, meaty or gritty conversations. We have to allow ourselves to have that yes and that consent aspect.
Definitely. You mentioned also in your intro for your that you sorry, I just realized I'm reading off my phone and there's this lovely light going on.
You're fine.
But the process of writing your story was one of the questions we wanted to talk to you about. And you mentioned that it spans 18 years of experience, and you pulled from 6 years of writing. So I'm kind of curious what that process felt like to you, and like how it felt to like condense like all of that experience down into like a consumable piece of art.
Right. Yeah. So the performance that I did, I just have been calling it a page stage. It's something that I do. This is now, I think, the 4th time that I've done this kind of a performance as a way to try to do just that, like get, you know, 18 years worth of memories and experience in my body, 6 years worth of writing. Like, how the hell are you supposed to figure out how to span that in, you know, 5 minutes? And the best way that I've seen that as a process is to literally throw it on the ground, to relinquish control. Like, there's no way that I can put together that narrative in any way that's going to make sense. I feel like there's a natural fracture and kind of chaos that has to happen, which is how memories kind of bounce around in our bodies and our brains, and how experience does as well. And so it really is, you know, a page stage for me. It's a process of accumulation, and it's a process of surrender as well. So the 2 hardest parts of that are, you know, going back and digging and really combing through all of my work and finding for this other piece. I started with last year. I went to I like scholarly whim of sexual that had come of me all as far back as presentation.
Hey, Ellie, you're starting to break up some. Are you still there?
Hi. Yeah, it just went away for a little bit. Sorry.
I was kind of like staring at the screen, hoping it would come back, but here you are now. So yeah, sorry, Danny. Do you remember where we were before?
No, I kind of lost track of where we were at as well.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So
no worries.
You've mentioned before that like the page stage thing, it's like almost like a form of divination, but like looking back instead of actually trying to look forward.
Yes. Yeah, which I think it's interesting that you mentioned that. I haven't thought of it that way before, but I see that as a big part of poetic practice in general, is, you know, figuring out how to engage with the past in a present moment with a vision towards the future. And that's kind of always what I talk about in terms of what I try to do with my poetic practice. I think it's really relevant also in activism and activist circles in general. It's, you know, there are things that we know personally in our bodies. There is heritage that we have. There are histories that we carry. And so finding a way to engage with it in the present in a way that we can move something into the future. I think about kind of that, I guess, time travel work a lot. And then I think that is definitely happening specifically in the page stage when I have no idea what I'm about to read. That's also part of why I like that mode of performance, is because I cannot, since I don't know what I'm about to put my hands on or what my voice is about to try to get around, I can't edit my response. Like the viewer and the audience and we are sharing a moment in the present that I'm experiencing in the past and that we're going to talk about maybe in the future. It's a really interesting kind of moment in time, I think.
Yeah, it's really powerful for sure. I did want to bring the conversation a little bit back to consent and just kind of, because you know when we asked you to participate in this and what the topic was, you were like, yes, I am there. So I want to get in your own words, like what consent means to you, why you think it's important to talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think consent is really important to talk about in this kind of dialogue model, kind of like how I addressed in the introduction to my piece, because I think it's a moving thing. It's not something that's stagnant. Like I talk about how, you know, sometimes I've been really wrong about what's felt right, or I've missed opportunities because I didn't allow myself to be vulnerable. And I feel like the only way to really get inside of those complications and something that moves in this dynamic is to have exchange with other people, and to try to externally process my own experience with someone else who can help me hold it and navigate it, and kind of look at the thing from various angles.
Definitely. Is there like a specific action, like if we shift from like the artistic point of view to the activist kind of point of view, is there something that you wish you saw more people doing as far as like moving this conversation and engaging with the idea of consent?
Yeah, I mean, I really love that we kind of started our segment with you talking about consent in the realm of dialogue, because that's one thing that I would really love to see, is the idea of consent be liberated from just sexual context. Because there's so many different levels of consent all of the time, some of which have to do with our body, some of which have to do with other aspects of our lives. But I feel like liberating the idea of consent from just a sexual context is really important, so that we can, I just feel like that opens gateways to really stepping into more agency in all aspects of our life.
Totally. Yeah, that's really beautiful. Just the idea that like talking can make things better, you know?
Yeah. I wish I knew some people that were like dedicated to that kind of work.
Yeah. Danny, we should start something.
Yeah.
Do you have anything that you wanted to add or ask Ellie, or are there any audience questions?
No audience questions, but Aubrey posted the 24-hour sexual assault line for women and men, which is awesome in both English and Spanish.
That's great. Thanks for that.
And for myself, I love, Ellie, the idea of like surrender, and in your piece, it really is a piece watching surrender. And I think someone, just like if we're thinking of things that are impacting our day-to-day lives and we're struggling with mentally or emotionally, I love the idea of just like, I'm not going to produce this in a coherent way. I'm not going to produce this in a way that makes sense. At some point, like I just kind of have to like let it come out as it does to first understand it myself. And I think that's really powerful advice for anybody struggling with anything currently.
Surrender.
Yeah, just letting go.
Yeah. On the other side of that, it's also maybe good advice for people who might violate consent is to surrender the need to control the situation. Like all around, surrender's good.
Absolutely. It's good, and it's terrifying. I mean, that's the other thing I tried to be really transparent with in the introduction and through. I mean, those are not comfortable things for me to do. It was really bizarre to do specifically empty room, because at least usually I'm used to being in a room of people that can maybe like hold some energy for me, or I can feel some care. And so it's really important, but it's hard work, as you all know. Vulnerability ain't easy.
Nope. Thanks for putting the hard work in, Ellie.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Same to y'all.
You being here means a lot. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for holding this conversation and this whole event. And I'm really excited to see how this embodies itself when we can all be together again.
Oh, I know. I missed
it. Someday soon.
All right. Cool. Bye, Ellie. Thanks so much. You have a
all
good
right.
Bye, Ellie.
Bye. Thanks, y'all.
All right, we have one more person.
Right. Let's bring Kali on.
Yeah, but while you're doing that, just wanted to say again, looking for donations for CCASA. I will mention again at the end how to do that. And if you have any reactions to this dialogue that you need to talk about or you need resources, please reach out and we will do our best to either help, listen, or correct if we have somehow gone astray in our goals here. So, hey, Callie. Kali, I'm sorry, I mispronounced it.
Hi, Kali.
She's figuring it out.
The audio connection, classic.
Every time.
Every time. Oh. So far, this technology is really not. It's going much better than you might expect. I just don't trust technology, Maybe I'm just not good at it.
Hey, Kali, can you hear us?
Are you on mute?
I don't know if she can hear.
I don't know if you've tried this, Kali, but in the bottom left, there's the microphone button. Oh, there we are, connecting.
Kali,
I did it.
how are you tonight, my dear?
I am good. I am great.
It's
been really nice listening to everyone and getting to digest a little bit before I had to start talking.
yeah, you picked the last spot on purpose, don't lie. Okay, so let's just go ahead and get into it. You wrote a piece that was kind of about your long-standing childhood trauma, right? So you can talk a little bit about how that piece relates to consent, but I think that's obvious. But maybe you could talk a little bit about how it fits into your entire experience, from childhood to adulthood.
Sure. So having consent taken from you so young, which happens to a lot of people that aren't ever going to tell their story, really can change everything. It can really change your life. I moved away from that situation and went to college and was such a stellar performer and an overachiever and all kind of running. And I went to a lot of therapy and did all the things you're supposed to do to get better. But when it happens at such a young age, really your attachment styles are affected, your ability to even know what your own concept of safety is affected. So I ended up, even though I was smart and capable and all this, I ended up falling into a lot of the same traps that a lot of people who've been through a lot of stuff in their childhood fall into. I fell into drug use and wanting powerful, slightly mean, maybe boyfriends who would protect me, and a lot of things that my family couldn't understand, even knowing that I'd been through some of what I'd been through. I certainly have even still not disclosed all of it. But having to deal with so much so young, and then to have it just keep going what has been pretty difficult. And there's this shame thing that happens in your head that of a lot of survivors, that this is kind of just how it's going to be. And I got to that point in my life where it was well, it's just going to keep happening. I'll just deal with it and be quiet. I even actually had a therapist tell me one time that with what I've been through, it's kind of common for people to no longer even react when traumatic things happen to them, which made me think, oh, I should stop reacting.
Yeah. So how has that kind of informed, you have kind of an activist bent, right? And I wanted you to give you the platform to talk about that, how your personal experiences has kind of informed your activism.
Well, you had actually mentioned in the last conversation how when you're someone that's violated consent, you need to surrender control of what that ends up looking like for you. And because a lot of mine was family members and then people that I was close to. It wasn't a thing where I was like, oh, let's just send them to jail, right? It was like, how do we continue actually progressing without necessarily completely shutting this down? And I feel like in my search for how to do that, I found a lot of trouble with therapists who had really narrow views of what the possibilities were. And so I started looking into things like restorative justice. And there's a woman named Sylvia Clute who does something called unitive justice. And then I'm kind of created my own form, which is, I'm calling it communitive justice. And it's a way to bring together perpetrators and victims without punitive ideas. So we don't call them perpetrator and victim, but they get to come together and have a dialogue that's mediated, and we have really specific ways we facilitate, so that in the end, the person who's been harmed can ask for something, because it's so hard to go through the legal process. Like, that is just unfathomable to me. But I would really appreciate if any of them were willing to have a conversation, you know?
Yeah, for sure. How is that shaping up, your communitive justice initiative?
So before all this, it was starting to go really well. And I even had some people in the community when I say in the community, I mean our artists, poet, writers, musicians of Denver community, reach out to me about some violations that they had experienced with people that are in the community. And I was really looking forward to getting to facilitate some healing there. And I told them that we will pick that back up when we can.
Good. Well, I hope you keep doing it, because it sounds, because I have most of my professional experience in the last few years has been in the legal industry. So the idea of restorative justice in the legal world is like this really transformative idea. So I'm curious how that might apply in just like a community setting.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing it too, which is why I switched from the whole unit. So the unit of justice thing that I learned from Sylvia Clute, who does use it actually in the legal system in Virginia. So some sentencing, like legal sentencing, will happen, and then she gets to come in and do this as well. The little bit I learned from her, I like turned that a little bit over when I started thinking about, but like, what if this isn't someone that you're gonna see, have the conversation with, and then never see again? What if it's someone you have to keep seeing? What if it's someone that is published and someone's gonna be mad that they've been published? How do we help the company deal with that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, that all makes a lot of sense. You mentioned in your video that you submitted that you wrote the piece that you read a year ago, and that was kind of the beginning of you processing your own personal experience with consent and violation. And I'm just wondering if you could speak a little bit more to that, maybe for other people that are, because it's hard for me to believe that there aren't still people out there that are harboring some things, even with a welcoming environment.
What do you mean aren't harboring things?
People out there that still have like trauma that they haven't revealed. And so I'm wondering if you can share how you kind of.
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of why I wanted to mention the therapist piece too, because I've had just experience after experience from childhood into adulthood of therapists not helping, of being detrimental, and of that kind of shutting things down. And then it took kind of a lighter consent violation in like a person in my personal life with someone I was close with, to finally like make me go, okay, this is more pervasive than I even realized. Like this is so affecting not just like my ability to avoid assault, but my ability to even say like, please leave my house now. And so I think that there's probably a lot more people than we know just sitting around us being kind of yes people to things because they just have a power struggle within them, whether or not it's being put on them visibly or currently. Like Shaun mentioned in the beginning, like the power struggle can be very invisible.
Yeah, no, it really can.
And societal.
Oh yeah, no, the that's always something I'm curious about is like the difference between like individual work and system work, right? And it sounds like you kind of merged the two just in your own personal journey.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I guess that I can say the same just because I'm obviously my story last year that I did was just like, hey, this is my current partner, he's great, and here's a list of other crap that people have done to me in comparison. But yeah, I think that I don't know, how important do you think it is to focus on individual versus like system healing? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's so tough. Like it's so tough to figure out what we would do systemically. But I think that really this is a social problem, and we don't have a way that we require businesses to take care of social problems that much in our society. And I think that, you know, for publicity and awareness, we need money, we need platforms and ways to get our words out there. And big businesses could be helping with that. And it's a lot easier for someone, excuse my wording, it could possibly be easier for a company to feel good getting behind immigration reform or some other really sensitive political topic. But sexual assault? Like, really, like, why would businesses get behind that? But also, what's going to change if businesses don't?
Sure. Did I, you stumped me.
Because it is such a strange thing. Like I'm not sure that I'm asking Procter and Gamble to release a statement tomorrow about sexual assault, right? But I'm not sure that I'm not either.
Yeah. Well, I think maybe you're touching on like the whole idea of power imbalances, and I do feel like the workplace and companies generally, like that's where a lot of power imbalances live. So I hear that for sure. Danny, did you have anything that you wanted to add? Or Kali, is there anything else that you were wanting to talk about that I haven't touched on?
Well, I mean, I appreciate you just like having the courage to come in here and just like name all these societal issues, to both share your story and then go like, and then what do we do and how do we push forward? And I think especially with a sexual assault, like with the patriarchy is just like constantly trying to silence that issue and not make it seem like it is affecting us. And as we can see from this conversation, it's just like, and so many other conversations I'm sure all of us have had, it's so prevalent.
Yeah, I mean, even in actually my therapy, there was like one doctor I saw briefly who asked if I would like him to put my stepdad on his kill list. Like even that was like this very patriarchal,
Wow.
power dynamic imposition way of dealing with my tender heart. You know,
severe violence in your name. Like, yeah, thanks. That sounds great. Like, yeah.
It just like, and I appreciate you naming it too, because like I work in mental health, and I think that getting support for any issue, like just because you see a therapist doesn't mean that therapist is going to be helpful.
Right.
And to find somebody who is you can connect with and who you feel seen with and who you feel safe with, because therapy is full of a bunch of different personalities and people.
Yeah, I definitely hope that as I continue on figuring out my business model for community justice, that part of it includes helping survivors find the right support. There's just so much possibility that can be so overwhelming.
Well, yeah. Like,
thank you guys so much.
Yeah. And to your point, like healing really does look different for everybody. Like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Highly posed, Danny, it kind of gets at it. Like some people respond with like anger and the need to express that anger, and other people like Kali have more of like you're just a very soft, like tender person, right? And so like your approach, it almost seems like more confusion, and then like, what do I do to stop whatever is causing that confusion? You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah.
And I think all
Yeah,
of
John had mentioned that too, about the uncertainty and the fear and the confusion that comes with these things happening, and how that just continues. It doesn't instantly go away because you got help, and it doesn't go away because you've been getting help for 10 years.
Yeah.
Right. Healing is a constant process.
Yeah, always. And like, I think I really don't want to like be too like feel good or whatever, but I don't know, I feel like focusing on healing is and like forgiveness and stuff like that, not to clear the way for more perpetrators, but like to like actually like do the work of like, because like no one else is going to do the work of fixing whatever you feel like needs to be fixed about you. And I feel like forgiveness and talking is why we're doing this. So
do you think self-forgiveness goes into it?
Well, that's kind of, maybe I should have clarified. That is what I mean, because I mean, like, it's to me, like, forgiving a perpetrator's not black and white, because nothing's black and white, but is more black and white than the self-forgiveness aspect, right? Because I can vouch personally for like just the shame of like letting it happen, or maybe engaging in like higher risk behavior, and that meaning I deserved what happened to me. I think like it's easy to say, oh, you have to like let yourself go, don't blame the victim. I know that that's like in the mainstream consciousness, but I don't think it's in the mainstream practice.
Thank you for making that clarification of something being like in the mainstream consciousness but not processed. I've had even a therapist say like when I walked in one day in jeans and a sweater, like, thank you for dressing more safely. I think this is going to be helpful for you.
Oh God, no, that's awful.
Man, Kali, I'm sorry that you've had these therapy experiences. Jesus fucking Christ.
Yeah.
And these are all different ones. I mean, I've been trying.
I believe I've seen it.
But I'm also like very thankful for that, and the push that it gave me to find other methods like unitive justice. There's something called rapid resolution therapy that I'm a big fan of, and just all the explorations I've done, shamanic and otherwise, toward healing outside of the traditional realm. And I think that that's really important for people to know, that like if they find their healing with a somatic therapist or trauma-informed yoga or dance, and never, ever, ever a psychiatrist, great. You're just as valid.
Mm-hmm.
We have an audience question for you, Kali. Chelsea says, I think sexual assault education has a place in entertainment in Hollywood, and she was wondering your thoughts on that.
Oh man, wouldn't that be cool? God. I mean, it's so the place where we've romanticized the lack of consent, right? So like, it would be nice if that would be the place where we addressed that we've been doing that for so long. I mentioned that a little bit in my video, that like, I still to this day, like have to conquer that in myself, that idea that like I need to be rescued. And that's so Hollywood romance style.
Yeah.
Well, Kali, I think we're a little past time, but I just wanted to say thank you again for.
Thank you. Thank you guys. Thank you both. Thank you everyone watching and commenting and donating.
Yeah, it's really awesome. I'm I don't have another word besides grateful, but that's what I am, is grateful.
Same.
I'll say one last thing, that my my former sister-in-law used to have a joke where she'd say donkey chains, like Donkashane, and that morphed over time into like many donkeys, and you have my eternal donkeys. So
many donkeys right back.
Many donkeys.
All right. Danny, what else?
I mean, if you're still watching, like, and you haven't seen Kali's video, also, I just want to recognize that you're getting a ton of support from our audience.
Oh, thanks. I'm not looking at it right now, but
yeah, and people are really showing up for you. Thanks for sharing your video. When I watched it, I was like literally blown away. So if you haven't watched it, please do it. It's courageous, like, to say the very least.
Yeah, I would 10 out of 10 agree. That's my new thing. 10 out of 10 agree.
10 out of 10 donkeys.
All right, Danny, you want to wrap us up?
Sure, like the whole conversation.
Yeah. I think we're about ready to sign off.
Well, thank you for everyone watching. Thank you for everyone who watched the videos. Please donate to C Casa. You can Venmo at Soul Stories. You can donate on the Facebook page. Was there a third area?
Oh, I was just saying that they could go to ccasa.org and easily see all the buttons for supporting and donating.
Great, yeah. Go support, donate, and most of all, keep having these conversations with your friends and loved ones, and keep holding space for the people that need the space. Yeah, and you have, if you need anything from us after this, if you need processing, I would honestly, I'm feeling a lot of emotions right now. I'm sure other people are feeling a lot of emotions. I would recommend finding something that is relaxing. Talk to somebody after this, find some grounding. Sometimes these conversations for me can affect me in unexpected ways that I might not even be currently aware of. So yeah, just all the support and love to everybody out there right now.
Yeah. Thank you all for watching. Thank you to John, Ellie, Shaun, Kali, and Heatherlyn for coming on tonight. Yes, please go donate. Reach out if you need anything at all, and know that we love you all very, very much.
And gratitude to Hannah for creating this fucking awesome initiative.
Couldn't do it without the support at all. So thank you.
All right.
Everybody have a good night.
Bye, friends.